1980s, a silent menace began to terrorize the roads of Interstate 65. A man without a physical description. This perverse criminal was an animal in every sense of the word. His calling card? The victims he chose. Female night auditors from hotels along the road, all robbed, shot, and raped in the middle of the night. He was one of the most elusive and successful serial killers that terrorized the Midwest, having his crimes only discovered to be the work of one man decades after they were committed. How could one man get away with such cruelty and violence unpunished? With the answers behind this infamous cold case now revealed in 2022, let's look at the history of the I-65 killer, also known as the Days Inn killer, and the haunting legacy left behind. First encounter. It all started in February of 1984 at a Super 8 motel in Elizabethtown, Kentucky. 41-year-old divorcee Vicky Heath had recently moved into the nearby town of Radcliffe in hopes of rebuilding her life with her new fiancé. In order to make ends meet and pay for their new home, Vicky worked as a night auditor, monitoring the Super 8 late into the night at the front desk. On typical nights, with occupancy rates hovering around 50%, time would be uneventful as Vicky spent her time glazing over romance novels. However, this would change on the cold winter night of February 20th, 1987. Vicky had been put on another night shift, and when the motel manager left around 11 p.m., she would be the only staff member present in the building, with every guest asleep, who would correctly assume that something violent had happened overnight. An officer that later arrived would find signs of a brawl between multiple people. Wondering where the hotel's clerk was at the time, the officer would search the premises for any signs of where they had gone. He found the answer behind the motel dumpster, the body of Vicky Heath, shot in the head and raped. While DNA from the crime scene was preserved, little else could be traced to the killer. The winter morning had left the ground covered in snow, which had already begun to melt by the time investigators arrived, erasing what few treads and footprints were left behind. If it weren't for advances in DNA technology, this would have been a simple one-off cold case. However, over 20 years later, with the submission of the evidence into the combined DNA index system, scattered incidents would align together to form the image of what would become known as the I-65, or Days Inn killer. Serial killings. 2 years later, on March 2nd, 1989, Mary Margaret Gill, who went by the name of Peggy, was scheduled that evening to audit the Merrillville Days Inn in Indiana. She was a 24-year-old creative individual, both an artist and baker, who had worked there to pay for college. Earlier that evening, she spent time with her father as his 51st birthday would come the day after. She would not live to see it. Peggy arrived at work that night just before 11 p.m. It was a busy night, with around 70 rooms booked. The temperature, not unlike in Elizabethtown 2 years earlier, was below freezing. For much of the night, things were uneventful. Peggy had spoken over the telephone to the general manager shortly after her shift began, and one guest would later testify having been checked in through her at the desk between 1:30 and 1:40 a.m. It would be until around 2 a.m. that a college student would arrive at the Days Inn with no greeting. The lobby was completely empty. The hotel's general manager, Betty Pierce, would be the first to notice something was wrong at 5 a.m. when Peggy had not made her routine check-in call. Betty called the hotel directly to no one on the other line. She made another call, this time to the police. Authorities arrived at the scene a little after 6 a.m., where they found an unmanned front desk without signs of a struggle. Peggy's car and wallet were still there. When her family was called over the phone, she wasn't home either. They were convinced Peggy was somewhere on site, until the manager discovered the cash drawer was pried open, indicating a robbery had taken place. To make matters worse, there was one place that the officers on site hadn't checked: a vacant wing of the hotel that had been closed for the winter. They found Peggy's body at the end of the vacant hallway. Like Vicky before her, she had been shot and raped in a similar manner. When it came down to motive, money was not considered the primary motive. Investigations would later find that only $179 was stolen from the cash drawer. The robbery was likely a front for a crime of passion that took Peggy's life for the killer's own amusement. And she wasn't the only victim on that same night. Just an hour away, the killer would strike again. His next victim? Jean Mary Gilbert, a 35-year-old single mother who, unsurprisingly, worked part-time at a Days Inn hotel as a night auditor, this time in a much smaller town of Remington, Indiana. Juggling not only this job and 2 children, but also a bookkeeping job for Carter Oil Supply and college classes, Jean had used her nights to fit studying into her otherwise packed schedule. The night of March 2nd, 1989, Jean had taken that night shift from another co-worker to attend her daughter's cheerleading event the next day. Like Peggy, Jean started her shift at 11 p.m. She would be accompanied by another clerk for an hour before being left as the only employee for the remainder of the night, presumably working on homework for her classes, as usual. Her last known activity was a wake-up call around 4:30 a.m. to a guest. The rest of the incident would play out almost identical to that of Vicky and Peggy. Guests would notice the empty lobby at 6 a.m. and make a call to the police. On arrival, the officers would find the hotel registration office locked off. With no one having the keys, they contacted the general manager to help them open the door. Meanwhile, a school bus driver called the police around the same time, reporting that they found a nude body of a woman on the side of the road. The discovery, too, was the same as the others. The registration office had been robbed of $247, with Jean missing and her belongings left behind. She would be found dead at the roadside as reported by the bus driver, 20 miles away from the Days Inn, shot and raped like the other of the killer's victims. After murdering Peggy, the killer had driven across Interstate 65 and decided his next victim several hours later, presumably between 4:30 and 5 a.m., and like he did earlier, started his attack as a robbery before escalating it into sexual assault, this time taking Jean far away from the hotel itself, likely due to its much smaller size, making it much harder to conceal the crime. Gunshots in the countryside were heard by a farmer around 5:30 a.m., indicating that being the approximate time of Jean's death. For the longest time, the witness evidence in all of these cases was vague and unreliable, with no hard footage pointing to even a proper appearance of the killer. Law enforcement were at loss as to who they were looking for. All they knew was that it was a man. But how old was he? How did he look? With little but his identical crimes giving him away, the man known as the Days Inn Killer, later I-65 Killer, would become infamous and elusive for almost 3 decades. The aftermath. Originally, the murders that took place were considered separate, until 2010, when DNA evidence matched among the 3 cases and more. This would put the I-65 Killer on the map as a public threat, now revealed to have been responsible for multiple assaults on women across the highway. While the scope of the killer had yet to be determined, the death of Jean would be the last of his confirmed kills. That did not mean he stopped, as DNA connections would reveal, a year later, in 1990, a 21-year-old Days Inn clerk in Columbus, Indiana would be robbed, stabbed, and raped, but would miraculously survive the attack, and would give one of a few descriptions of the killer having green eyes and a lazy right eye. In 1991, another woman from Minnesota would also survive an attack, describing the attacker as a 6 foot to 6'2" white male with grayish-brown hair, wearing a flannel shirt with blue jeans, while confirming that the killer had green eyes and a lazy right eye as well. These descriptions, along with several other confirmed attacks along I-65, would paint a clearer picture of the killer. With attacks being between January to March, the killer was likely a seasonal worker who worked a travel-heavy job such as a truck driver or a traveling salesman. The profile would reignite interest in the otherwise cold cases, and it would be on April 5th, 2022, when a long genealogy investigation would uncover the identity of the I-65 killer through one of his close relatives at a staggering 99.99% match. Harry Edward Greenwell. Born December 9, 1944 in Louisville, Kentucky, Greenwell was an employee of the Canadian Pacific Railroad who worked for public safety for 30 years until February 2010, dying 3 years later of cancer. His criminal record was revealed to be extensive even before his Days Inn killings, having been arrested for armed robbery, sodomy, and robbery. After the murders, he had been arrested several times for unrelated crimes as well, with nothing pointing him to his serial killings. In fact, to many around him, his identity as the I-65 killer was a shock. His obituary described him as a man with many friends who loved his straight-up attitude. His second wife, Julie Jenkins, had thought him to be kind and caring, having supported her fight against breast cancer, and all around being known for benign things such as his love of gardening. In his last moments, Greenwell had asked for a priest. Did he maybe confess for his crimes? It's unclear how much remorse he had for his actions, but it goes to show that everyone has a side of themselves they're unwilling to expose. As of now, investigators believe more cases will be connected to the deceased killer in the near future. So there you have it. While it may have been a long time coming, at least we know there's one less killer on the loose to worry about. Do you think Greenwell had remorse in his later years, and why do you think he targeted those specific women as victims? Let us know in the comments below. If you appreciated this video, make sure to like and subscribe for more true crime coverage. Thanks for watching, and see you soon in the next video.